We're taking you live now to Treasurer Josh Frydenberg speaking in Canberra.
Reflected their forecast of a big hole they see emerging across the global economy. They are forecasting a contraction in the global economy of 3% this calendar year. To put that in perspective, at the height of the global financial crisis, the global economy contracted by just 0.1%. Importantly, they are forecasting that the global economy will bounce back strongly in the calendar year 2021, with growth of 5.8%. These numbers from the International Monetary Fund are not surprising. They reflect the reality that we're in and the severe economic impact that economies around the world are facing as a result of the spread of the coronavirus. They also underline the importance of the major support packages that countries like Australia have announced. At around $320 billion, or 16.4% of GDP, Australia's support packages is much greater than those we've seen from a number of other countries around the world. We have provided cash payments to millions of Australians. We are providing a cash flow boost to hundreds of thousands of small businesses. We have injected, with the Reserve Bank, over $100 billion into our financial system to support the lending of banks and other non-bank lenders. And of course, with a $130 billion JobKeeper program, we have provided a wage subsidy, which is an economic lifeline to the nation at this critical time. We'll continue to take the actions necessary, but we are seeing progress on the health side by flattening the curve, and we are also seeing the benefits of the economic measures that we have announced. And just finally, tonight I will be joining a video conference call with my G20 counterparts. It will be an opportunity to exchange notes about the various measures that countries are putting in place to support their economies, and also the challenges that we are continuing to face at home, but also across the globe. From Australia's perspective, our messages are clear and consistent. We must continue to see the trade in essential items like health supplies at this time. And the current crisis should not be seen as a cause for protectionism. We'll also continue to support emerging economies and many of those developing economies who do not have the established health systems that we see in Australia and in other nations. These are messages, together with the need for continued synchronised action by central banks, including the Reserve Bank of Australia, are vitally important to ensure that the Australian economy and the global economy get to the other side of the coronavirus.
Treasurer, one of the key forecasts is that unemployment is to average 7.6 this year in Australia, then going up to 8.9, and there's not that many countries seeing an increase in their average unemployment in 2021. Why do you think that is so, especially given the amount of support that the government and the Reserve Bank and the states are pumping into the economy?
Well, there's two important points to make there, Shane. Firstly, as the IMF a couple of weeks ago were finalising their numbers, it was before the JobKeeper payment was announced. And as you know, the JobKeeper payment will ensure that many Australians remain in their jobs and maintain that formal connection between employer and employee and won't be joining those Centrelink queues. And that was one of the driving purposes behind the JobKeeper payment. The other point to make is at the time that the IMF were putting together their figures, the Australian curve was heading in the wrong direction, if you like. We were seeing an exponential increase of more than 20% a day in the number of cases of coronavirus affected people. Since that time, we've bent that curve and we're seeing a growth of less than 2% per day, and our health measures are making significant progress. So I'd ask you to take those factors into account because, of course, the success on the health side helps also determine the broader economic impacts that are also taking place.
And does that extend, Treasurer, to the IMF's growth estimates for Australia as well? Or they may be
it does in terms of when they were putting together this report. And again, tonight is a G20 call, Phil. Tomorrow night is an IMF call, and I'll be joining my counterparts then.
All ministers and public service chiefs are going to take a 20% pay cut. She said it's about leadership. At a time we're seeing mass job losses here in Australia, companies are forcing their employees to take pay cuts. Is it time that Australian politicians take a pay cut?
Well, as you know, we've frozen the pay increases for politicians here and for public servants. And Anthony Albanese was asked this question, and Matthias Cormann have been asked this question, and they've given the answers that, well, again, that's the action that we've taken.
Just on the mobile phone app that the government's working on, what exactly is the data that the government would be taking from people's phones, and what can you say to reassure people that their privacy will still be protected?
Well, the Attorney-General is working through those privacy-related issues, and obviously we're modelling the development of our app similar to what has been rolled out in Singapore, and it's all about protecting the safety of Australians. And if you've come into contact with someone who has the coronavirus, and that obviously increases the chances that you've been affected by it. And of course, it's in your interest to know that, and it's in the interest of people around you to know that. So the app is voluntary, it's an opt-in, and the privacy issues are being worked through by the Attorney-General.
Is it true that social restrictions could be relaxed if at least 40% of the population sign up to this app?
Well, again, this app is important in contact tracing, and obviously we've got increased testing that's taking place, and we're seeing progress in bending the curve. But my message, and the Prime Minister's message, the Health Minister's message, has been consistent and clear. We will continue to take the best possible medical advice that's available to us, and that's served the nation well. If you look abroad, if you look at Japan and you look at Singapore, they thought they were having great success in beating back the virus, yet they saw a second wave of cases and they've had to put tighter restrictions in place. Sweden, which went down the route of allowing large gatherings, have now called in the military to set up a hospital in the middle of Stockholm, and with less than half of the Australian population, they have more than 10 times the number of deaths from the coronavirus. We need to move away from this mindset of thinking that the coronavirus is an older person's virus. It's not an older person's virus. It's not a younger person's virus. It's a virus that affects all of us. I mean, the median age of those who have lost their lives from the coronavirus is around 80. The median age of those who have been hospitalised from the coronavirus is around 60. The median age of those who have contracted the virus is 47. But if you look at the greatest cohort, the size of the number of people who have contracted this virus, that's those aged between 20 and 29, which indicates that those people are contracting the virus. Some are going to be dealing with it more than others, but they'll also be passing it on to others. And we need to treat every Australian equally here. We need to value every Australian life equally. That's why this is a Team Australia moment. This is why we're all in it together. This is why we need to put in place those health restrictions based on the medical advice.
If President Trump has decided to halt funding for the WHO, will Australia now take a tougher position on that organisation in terms of its funding?
Well, firstly, we respect the decisions of any sovereign country in relation to who they fund and what they fund. In terms of Australia, we see the World Health Organisation playing an important role, particularly in our region, and that's important to Australia. And as you know, we have funded the World Health Organisation, but that doesn't mean that we've agreed with them on everything. And the Prime Minister has been very clear about the wet markets, for example. I mean, it's unbelievable It's extraordinary that the World Health Organization sees it fit for these wet markets to continue in China. They shouldn't. I mean, they've been the source of outbreaks that have killed people around the world. I would have thought, from the World Health Organization's perspective, protecting the health of the world is its first priority.
Then will you commit to reviewing the funding? If obviously they've got that call so fundamentally wrong, why isn't Australia reviewing its funding?
Because firstly, we see the World Health Organization contributing to better health outcomes in our region. Some of the work that they do in developing countries is important. And we play our role in supporting global organisations through the UN. But that's not to say we don't disagree with them from time to time. So we'll make those views known about areas where we think the World Health Organization can do a better job. But we'll obviously continue to support global.
If you'd like to watch that press conference in full, it continues on